corporate innovation is dead. And corporate innovation is going to come from two places. It's going to come from startups, and it's going to come from skunkworks.
Welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. Just sit back, relax, and learn from the leaders of today. It's a journey. Each one is different, unique, inspiring. Let's get started. This episode is powered by J Ventures, a community-driven VC fund in Silicon Valley in partnership with Leumi Tech, sponsored by Homeward Ventures, Hippo Insurance, Upwest Labs, Synergy Global, Hillel at Stanford, Leap, Birthright Excel, Serona Partners, and in media partnership with C-Tech. Hello and welcome to 20-Minute Leaders. This is going to be a very special episode, one that I enjoyed so greatly. Meet Tzahi Weisfeld, Vice President at Intel, but much more than that. Tzahi is a seasoned executive, serial entrepreneur, and Intel Vice President and General Manager of Ignite. His career span of 25 years in tech, consumer, and enterprise markets. President of ASN, Accelerating Startup Nations, Tzahi was one of the founders of the Microsoft Israel R&D site and a member of its management team for 8 years. This was also head of Microsoft for Startup and founder of the Microsoft Accelerators. His responsibilities span across 110 countries and included Microsoft BizSpark, a global startup accelerator partnership with more than 200 accelerators in 47 countries, Microsoft Later Stage Accelerators in Seattle, Bangalore, Beijing, Shanghai, Berlin, London, and Tel Aviv, as well as post-acceleration programs and VC engagement. Prior to Microsoft for Startups, Tzahi co-founded a few startups, including Sequoia-backed Mintigo, acquired by Anaplan, was Vice President of Marketing and Strategy at Modu, the Israeli personal communications startup, whose IP was sold to Google. Tzahi held the position of Senior Director of Business Management at Microsoft prior to his period at Microsoft. He was the General Manager of Americas and Corporate Vice President for the mobile market at Msystems, which was acquired by SanDisk for $1.6 billion at the end of 2006. Additionally, Tzahi is among the 10 topmost influential Israelis in tech worldwide, according to Business Insider in 2014, and was also named one of the top influencers on Israeli tech by NewsGeek magazine in 2015. I'm not interested in talking about one of the specific companies you've co-founded, and you've co-founded a bunch of them that have got acquired and backed by some of the top VCs in the world. We're also not going to talk about a specific experience in either Microsoft or Intel, because we want to touch on a bigger theme here, which is this idea of corporate reinvention and innovation. And so I'm really excited to host you here. Thank you for coming. And I want to start, Tzahi, by having you for a second sit back and reflect on sort of since like in the 1990s when you started in tech. Who are you in the tech world? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an entrepreneur? Who is Tzahi?
Sure. So again, excited being here. Tzahi or Zach Weisfeld, depends on the side of the world you're at. I think of myself as an entrepreneur first. And I've been an entrepreneur for the past 30 years. So 8 years in the Valley, the rest here in Israel, different sizes of companies, from bootstrapping to raising $120 million and selling to Google for close to nothing, but also been a corporate entrepreneur. So mid-2018, I left Microsoft for the third time. For whatever reason, the company accepted me back every time, and really tried to reinvent Microsoft in many ways. And we're going to talk about that. And now running Intel for Startups here. It's a fascinating journey, right? Being in the early internet days, I was a CEO of a small startup, a small Israeli internet company in mid-90s, where internet just started, right? We were the second biggest internet portal of the country, a company called NetKing. We were the first digital agency. So we've built the websites for some of the biggest companies here. And I brought DoubleClick to Israel for the first time. So that was really when this whole phenomena started. And then throughout the years, saw a lot of these changes that we went through. The web, that was Web 1.0, then 2.0, then, we're going through definitely blockchain and a metaverse now, et cetera. So it's been a fun ride. I think what was fascinating also is to see not just the startup world, but how does these large multinational corporations are dealing with the fact that disruption is happening on the outside, is not just happening on the inside. So I think that was the fun part of my journey. That was a bit different than a lot of my friends that stayed running more and more startups. They eventually became VCs and supported startups. That was a kind of a shift I made at a certain point in my career.
And so you're making this shift, and you're understanding that there's this whole other paradigm to the world of incumbents that have phenomenal people, phenomenal technologies, but they're perhaps a little bit misunderstood, perhaps both internally and externally, with vast potential that any startup would love to have. And something about this resource is being underutilized, and it sort of clicks for you. What is sort of this thesis that you start building for yourself?
So clearly, the one big difference between these huge behemoths, these huge companies with amazing talent, super deep, super strong, super smart, and these small startups that are also super smart and they want to eat the whole world. What the difference is the culture, right? There is a big culture differences between these two kind of animals. And I told you, I think earlier, one of the quotes as I was working at Microsoft and trying to do this work, and one of my mentors at Microsoft, an amazing guy, very small, Chilu. He was the head of office and Bing. He was an executive vice president of Microsoft under Ballmer.
I heard about those products.
Yeah,
they're
tiny,
very small, right?
$40 billion business, right? And she told me at the time, said, Zach, you know what? Corporate innovation is dead. And corporate innovation is going to come from two places. It's going to come from startups, and it's going to come from skunkworks. And I won't go too much into the skunkworks, phenomena. But specifically on the startups, I actually took this as my part of my main mission, is to help reinvent some of these large, amazing companies through this journey with startups. And when I walked you through the journey at Microsoft, it was interesting. I came back to Microsoft back in 2010 for the third time. And I was hired into Microsoft Israel after I was part of the founding team of the Microsoft Israel R&D Center at the time. And then later I was asked to come back and help with two things: help connect Microsoft to startups and help drive acquisitions. But very quickly, I figured the problem was not local. The problem was global. Microsoft forgot how to speak and how to engage with startups. And I met with Satya Nadella. So my team reported to Satya Nadella. He was the head of our server and tool division. It was before he was the CEO. And they brought with me a blog post of a guy you probably know, Paul Graham. So Paul Graham was the founder of Y Combinator. And still on his private blog, there's a blog post that's titled "Microsoft is Dead." And he said, Microsoft is dead. Microsoft used to shed a big shadow in the tech world, haven't realized when the shadow disappeared. And the third thing he said, I don't invite them anymore to my demo days. And I went to Satya and I said, Satya, black over internet, it says we're done. We're dead. We're out of the picture. And asked his permission to reinvent the way the company works with entrepreneurs. And built this program, a startup accelerator program. Now, 2010, 2011, Microsoft was the evil empire. No one wanted to do anything with Microsoft. I have a good friend here, a VC in Israel, that I told him, Yaniv, I'm going to start this accelerator for Microsoft. And he said two things. He said, one, not a single startup in his right mind would want to join a Microsoft accelerator. And the second thing he said is, I'm not going to invest in any of the companies that went through your program because they're idiots. This was the way it started, right? And
wow.
And I said, okay, as an entrepreneur, I said, okay, that's an opinion. He's entitled to his own opinion. I think differently and I see things differently. And we started this program and we did it.
I mean, it wasn't just see differently. You saw, he looked at the current state of affairs. You said, wait, with a few action items, it can be very
yes,
different.
Yes. And then I built this program. It started in Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv, Bangalore, Beijing, Shanghai, Berlin, London, Paris, Seattle, Sydney. And we had some amazing companies go through the program, AppsFlyer, Known Backup, and Spot. And Paris just got a huge investment round last night, announced it, and Fabric, and really amazing set of companies, many unicorns that came out of the program. And it was a really, really fun journey. So we've done that. We've shown that we could help change the corporate and change the engagement of these early stage startups with the corporate and have both sides learn a lot in the process. Startups leverage the amazing resources and access these corporates have, and the corporate learning a new skill, learning, how to be more nimble, learning the world of these disruptors, which was an amazing connection. So that was
and it's not just the startups, obviously, right? Because I think today, pretty consecutively, Microsoft is ranked as, if not the top, as one of the top places to work for in Israel. I know about half of my friends are working in Microsoft R&D. It sounds like this is something that 10 years ago, people would also say to you, no way.
Look, I tried to hire entrepreneurs to run my programs around the world. And the first thing most of them say is, no way, I'm not going to work for Microsoft. That was the way, right? That was the thing. And I was lucky enough to do this under Satya. I was lucky enough to have Satya take on the CEO role. And Satya has been amazing driving that change at Microsoft. And I had the opportunity to be very close there with amazing people through Scott Guthrie, that runs enterprise, runs cloud and enterprise, and many people, organization that helped make it the reality. But that was the Microsoft journey, which I left mid 2018 because I haven't seen my kids for too many years. I manage a company, an organization called Microsoft for Startups, 110 countries, about $500 million a year spent on ecosystem development. And so I left. I built more Legos in 1 year that I built all my life before that. And then met Bob Swan, the CEO, the former CEO of Intel. So he was on a visit in Israel. Yaniv Garti, the GM of Intel in Israel, and Avner Goren, one of the senior CTOs here and architects, a VP here, asked me to meet with Bob and came with the concept that we may change the way Intel works with entrepreneurs under the same challenge, that these companies have become pretty separated from that energy of these early stage startups. Now, Intel has an amazing corporate venture fund, right? Working very well. Right. Intel Capital is a great venture fund, and it's been working for 30 years and investing in Israel and many other places. But Bob was concerned that we're not learning enough in the process of working with these startups as a company. And asked me to come on board as a consultant, basically helping build this new program. It's called Ignite, under his part of the CEO office. And so this couple years ago, Bob since left. We have Pat now as a CEO, an amazing CEO for Intel, which I believe is going to reinvent this amazing company. And I report now to Greg Lavender, the CTO of Intel. And Ignite exists now in Tel Aviv. It's in its 6th batch. We have a European program operating out of Munich. And we're right now starting our Boston program and then London. These are the 2 next programs. The program got awarded. So 2.5 years ago, before we started, as a consultant, I went out and I surveyed the market and I asked a couple hundred startups, which corporate do you want to engage with? And we did both aided and unaided surveys. We asked them, if you have every option in the world, and not even a single one said Intel, right? These were software, most of them software.
Wow.
2.5 years later, today, Intel Ignite has been awarded the #1 startup accelerator program in the country. We're getting about 250 applications per batch we're opening. We only accept 10. And we already have an example from our first batch, company called Granulate, that came to us with $4.5 million to our first batch. There were 5 people. And then lately you enter an acquisition, very, very significant acquisition by Intel. And almost 30% of the companies through the program actually doing POCs today with Intel. And they don't have to be chip companies. They don't have to build ASICs. They could be SaaS, enterprise SaaS, cybersecurity, a variety of areas they deal with. They need to be deep in technology. But we're interested to connect. We're interested to connect with all these disruptors across the world. And as a testament for that changing the company, so a month ago, we got awarded by Intel's CEO, what's the Oscars of Intel, or for the Israelis in your crowd, what's known as Bas Biton Israel, the one thing that you get when you save the country, right? That's a big award. So we got awarded by Intel CEO as the Intel Appreciation Award, which is a very big deal here of actually making a big difference for the company. So again, it's all about reinvention. How can we help reinvent these amazing companies through the work we do with startups?
So I have to ask. I mean, it sounds pretty consistently. You're going into these corporates, and within a very short amount of time, you're changing the narrative globally, especially most predominantly amongst those that are relevant. These are the entrepreneurs. This is the ecosystem. Is it? I mean, what is it that you do? Is it changing the narrative of the organization? Is it changing internally the organization, changing the management? I mean, what's the magic sauce here?
So look, first of all, like many things in the investment world, et cetera, it's not science, it's art. And I've been spending the past 12 years or so really fine tuning that machine to make that impact. And the first thing that is, that makes the difference is what you optimize for. With these programs, it's really critical what you optimize for. And the number one mission, what's on the slide that's presented to the CEO of Intel, or was presented to Satya at Microsoft, is the number one mission of the program is accelerating groundbreaking startups. There's nothing about Intel in that line. There's nothing about Microsoft in that line. It's about how to take the best possible startups and how to make them as successful as fast as we can. So it's all these resources we invest in making them great. Now we take no equity, we take no pay. People ask me, why don't you take equity? One of the tricks to get the best companies possible is actually not to take equity, and then you can get the Granulates of the world and many of these great companies. Now, you say yes, but it doesn't make sense. It makes a lot of sense because ending up as a large corporate with hundreds of small equity parts in startups, which most of them are going to go anyway, doesn't really make sense. And we could pay a small premium for the ones we're really interested in a later stage. So the first thing is, what do you optimize for? So we're optimized first and foremost about the startup. If that's not going to work and we're not going to get the best ones, nothing else is going to happen. Then the other thing is, which again, if you look at many of these programs around the world, many of these corporate acceleration programs, what makes them successful or fail boils down to three things. One is, how are they staffed? So many programs are staffed by super smart MBA graduates that are really great program managers, or staffed by someone from the corporate that's about to retire. In the last few years, they let them run the corporate accelerator or innovation program or whatever. Both don't really work that well. And I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone, but what really needs to happen is the program has to be managed by an entrepreneur, someone that built a company, hired, fired, raised funding from reputable investors, and bring their own network to work. So someone that understands what does it mean to get your term sheet pulled away in the last minute. Someone understands what does it mean when your significant other at home sits in front of you, say you need to pick. It's either me or the startup. It has the issue of almost not being able to pay the team because the money just ran out. If you don't have that experience personally, it's very hard to build the value that I believe needs to be built in the program. So staffing a managing director that's been a serial entrepreneur, a CTO, which is a very senior technical person that understands and can help the companies from product as well as technology, a deal flow manager that's super energetic, highly engaged in the community of startups and universities and Israeli case it's the army. An ops manager that runs the operations on day to day, because there's a space, there's a program, and then someone on the business side that is a success manager, someone that does value creation. So that's the team, right? That's the pod. So this is the first thing is how do you staff? The second, how do you fund? Many of these programs are hobbies. They are not businesses. I said Ignite is not a hobby.
Right.
And Microsoft Accelerators was not a hobby. It was a program that has to be fully funded. It's not supported by a bank that, so SVP wants to come and do an event. Great. I don't need them to fund my program. I don't want to be reliant on sponsors, right? The program has to be fully funded by the corporate. So first thing is staffing. The second thing is fully funded program. And the third thing, which is probably the most important one, is who's the sponsor in the organization. Best case, CEO. Satya was my Satya was my sponsor before he was the CEO, and later on, and then Bob Swan, the former CEO of Intel, was my sponsor. Or if it's not the CEO, it's someone that reports to the CEO. So today it's Greg Lavender at Intel. I report to him, and he is the sponsor for Ignite. In Microsoft, it was Scott Guthrie for his org. So super critical to have the organization, the program report to the right places, because then you can make an impact. Otherwise, many of these programs end up as marketing or community support or whatever, and they don't survive too many years. Right. So sorry for the long answer, but I think these are the kind of things that make these programs successful or not.
I think that what sticks with me, besides I think each of these pieces on their own, I think is phenomenal, because you're touching on these decision-making points that people make, and perhaps they're not sure, whether it's the right decision to make, and there's different considerations on all ends. But overall, what really got to me was this idea that it's 12 years of art in the making, right? I mean, this is a process that you've done again and again, deeply understanding the needs, deeply understanding the entrepreneurial mindset, transitioning to corporate mindset, within corporate mindset, also continuously reinventing.
Yeah.
And having this global experience, the energy that you bring to the table, I can only imagine why these phenomenal leaders are taking some of their precious time to back these amazing initiatives, because I can't think of much stronger bets than when a CEO or a CTO of such a large organization comes and says, I want to buy this. I'm buying into you. And I even want to look at the slide which says the mission that you're presenting. That's a huge deal.
And that's, look, we had an event in Dallas last week, and Pat, the CEO of Intel, came to spend time with the 10 startups we brought in. And to see Pat come in and ask questions, one of Oxai, one of our startups, and ask them to tell me, I don't understand, is it passive or is it dynamic protection you're doing? And asking another startup, I don't understand exactly the kind of customer. So Ina from Ilomec, he came and said, I'm kind of struggling with what is the exact customer? Who is the person you're selling into at the customer? And that's, again, Pat, Intel CEO, really trying to understand the business and technology of these little startups, gets highly energized, and then follow up on these meetings by sending other people they think need to learn and need to engage. And how can we do something bigger together with these tiny startups? And that's, I think, the beauty of it. You get to these amazing leaders of these big companies, and they look at these startups and they don't say, look, there's a tiny startup, let's figure out how we can help them. Say, hey, what can we learn? How can we co-create a better future together? I don't care how small they are. They're super brilliant, and they could be super relevant for our success. Right? And I think that's a huge difference, right? So that again worked well in these few companies and a few more that I work with as well in my period between the two.
Tzahi, I can't wait to continue following the journey. Thank you so much for your time and for your contribution to startups, our ecosystem, the global ecosystem, corporates, it's really inspiring for me to hear these stories, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you very much.
I have the best job in the world. I get in one end to help rebuild or reinvent these huge, amazing companies with the support of these great CEOs and leaders. And on the other hand, I get to play with all these startups constantly and get hundreds of amazing founders that I can help be successful. So best job in the world. And by the way, I get paid for it. So that's even better.